Clinical studies reveal that 1 in 2 women after menopause continue to crave intimacy, touch, and closeness. But here's the paradox. While the body still longs for connection, women living alone are often told their sex life is over. What really happens to female sexuality after 50 when no partner is around? My name is Dr. Eliza Hart, a board-certified gynecologist with more than 15 years of experience helping women navigate menopause hormones and the unspoken challenges of intimacy after 40. Over the years, I've listened to thousands of women, widows, divorcees, and those who chose independence, and one truth keeps resurfacing: sexuality does not disappear with age. It transforms. Medical research shows that estrogen levels may decline after menopause, but the neural circuits of desire, the blood flow to intimate tissues, and even testosterone continue to play their roles. In other words, biology keeps whispering even if society insists on silence. The gap between what women feel inside and what the world tells them outside creates not only confusion, but sometimes quiet grief. In today's conversation, I'll share the medical truths, the safe practices, and the small steps you can take to reclaim intimacy on your own terms. If this resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe and type 1 in the comments so we can keep building a space where women over 50 are finally heard. 1. The hidden truth about desire after 50. For decades, women have been told a quiet but powerful myth that once menopause arrives, their desire should fade like a forgotten chapter. Many of my patients walk into my office carrying this belief as if it were an unavoidable destiny, only to confess with a mix of surprise and relief that their bodies still speak sometimes more insistently than before. This hidden truth often emerges in whispers. "Doctor, I thought it was over, but I still feel it. Why is no one talking about this?" From a medical perspective, the explanation is clear. While estrogen does decline after menopause, other players remain active. Testosterone, though present at lower levels, continues to influence arousal and energy. The nervous system still responds to touch and blood flow to intimate tissues, persists. These mechanisms remind us that female sexuality is not a switch that turns off at 50, but rather a living system that adapts and evolves with age. Scientific surveys consistently report that nearly half of women between 55 and 70 still experience regular desire, challenging the stereotype that passion belongs only to the young. Yet beyond biology, there is a deeper dimension. At this stage of life, desire is rarely about meeting someone else's expectations. Instead, it becomes an inner compass, guiding women toward what truly brings them joy and a renewed sense of vitality. Many tell me that intimacy now feels freer, less pressured, and more authentic because it is finally about them, not about performance. The body, though changed, continues to whisper its needs, and those whispers deserve to be heard with compassion rather than silenced with shame. When women begin to accept this reality, a profound shift happens. What once felt like a contradiction becomes a doorway. They realize that feeling desire in later years is not an anomaly, but a sign of being fully alive. And it is precisely here, in this rediscovery of vitality, that the emotional weight of living alone begins to reveal itself, a subject too often overlooked, yet essential to understanding the full landscape of intimacy after 50, and one that deserves both medical clarity and human empathy. 2. The emotional landscape of living alone. Acknowledging desire is only the first step. What follows is the reality of how it feels to carry that desire in a quiet house. Many women in their 50s, 60s, and beyond tell me that while their bodies continue to send signals, the silence of their surroundings grows louder. They describe evenings when the absence of footsteps in the hallway or the simple comfort of another voice becomes almost heavier than the lack of intercourse itself. It is not always the act of sex that is missed, but the subtle rituals of intimacy, the brush of a hand, the warmth of another body, the reassurance of being seen. Psychological research confirms this deeply human need. Studies on aging and emotional health show that loneliness is not only painful, but physiologically damaging, increasing the risk of heart disease, memory decline, and even mortality. When a woman feels invisible or untouched for long stretches of time, her stress hormones remain elevated, eroding both her physical and emotional resilience. This is why I often remind my patients that intimacy is more than pleasure. It is medicine, a regulator of mood, and a stabilizer of well-being. I remember one retired school teacher in her mid-60s who sat across from me twisting her wedding ring that she had never taken off, even years after her husband's passing. She admitted she no longer longed for him specifically, yet she missed the small moments of connection, the way he used to place a cup of tea by her side, or simply hold her hand during quiet evenings. "It is not the marriage I mourn," she told me softly. "It is the feeling of being cherished." Her story reflects what countless others express, that intimacy in later life is less about passion alone and more about belonging. Understanding this emotional terrain is crucial because once we recognize that the ache is not weakness, but honesty, the path forward begins to change. Solitude does not have to mean emptiness. It can become an invitation to rediscover yourself, to cultivate closeness in unexpected forms, and to build new rituals of tenderness. And from this recognition arises the next profound question: if intimacy is not confined to intercourse, how might it be redefined to honor women living alone in their later years? 3. Redefining intimacy beyond penetration. Once we acknowledge the emotional landscape of living alone, a new truth becomes clear. Intimacy has never been limited to penetration, though culture often insists otherwise. For much of their lives, women are taught to measure their sexuality by intercourse, whether they can perform, satisfy, or endure. This narrow definition leaves many believing that once the body changes or a partner is absent, their intimate life has ended. Yet in reality, intimacy is far broader, richer, and more enduring than a single act. From a medical standpoint, pleasure and connection arise through multiple pathways. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, is released not only during intercourse, but also through gentle touch, warm embraces, and even self-care practices like mindful breathing or skin-to-skin contact with oneself. The brain, not just the reproductive organs, orchestrates intimacy, reminding us that closeness is as much psychological and emotional as it is physical. By expanding the definition, women gain freedom from the burden of performance and rediscover the essence of tenderness. I think of a woman in her 70s who came to me embarrassed to admit that intercourse had become painful despite lubricants and medical support. She feared her sexuality was gone, but when I asked her what she missed most, her eyes filled with tears. "I miss being touched without judgment. I miss feeling held." That moment was profoundly instructive. She did not mourn penetration. She mourned the absence of tenderness. Her longing was not mechanical, but emotional, a desire to feel connected and safe. When women begin to embrace this wider vision of intimacy, something remarkable shifts. Instead of mourning what is no longer possible, they begin to celebrate what still is: the simple pleasure of touch, the ritual of a warm bath, the gratitude of running one's hands across the body without criticism. These acts may seem small, but they awaken a sense of being cherished even in solitude. And as this perspective takes root, a deeper exploration becomes necessary. How can women living alone actively nurture their sexual health, not as an afterthought, but as a vital practice of self-care that protects both body and spirit? 4. The role of self-pleasure, a vital form of self-care. For many women, the idea of self-pleasure was never part of the conversation when they were younger. It was dismissed as shameful or unnecessary, something that respectable women should not admit to. Yet the absence of this discussion has left countless women isolated, unsure if their ongoing desire is normal and uncertain about how to respond to the signals of their own bodies. It is time to correct that silence. Medically, the benefits are undeniable. Gentle self-touch stimulates blood flow to the vaginal tissues, preserving elasticity and reducing dryness, two of the most common complaints after menopause. Regular arousal supports pelvic circulation, which in turn helps bladder control and overall tissue resilience. Orgasms release endorphins and oxytocin, lowering stress, improving sleep, and stabilizing mood. These are not trivial effects. They are measurable improvements that enhance both quality of life and long-term health. But perhaps the most transformative effect is emotional. Self-pleasure can become an act of self-love, a way of reclaiming a body that may have been criticized, ignored, or misunderstood for decades. I recall a widow in her early 60s who admitted she had not touched herself in years, fearing it would dishonor her late husband. When she finally allowed herself to explore gently, she returned to my office weeks later with tears in her eyes, saying she had discovered not only her sexuality, but also her sense of wholeness again. For women living alone, this practice is not a sign of desperation or loss. It is a bridge back to vitality, a way to honor desire without apology, and a reminder that pleasure is still available even without a partner. And since this topic is often hidden in silence, I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you believe women should feel free to talk openly about self-pleasure after 50? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Your voice could encourage someone else to feel less alone. Recognizing self-pleasure as self-care opens the door to another important discussion: the safe use of tools that can make the experience not only more comfortable but healthier and more fulfilling in the years ahead. 5. Safe use of sexual aids. When conversations about self-pleasure finally begin, another question often follows in a lowered voice. Doctor, is it wrong to use something to help me? This hesitation is understandable. Many women over 50 grew up in a time when sexual aids were hidden behind stigma, portrayed as forbidden or shameful. Yet today, medicine and psychology alike recognize them as valuable tools for maintaining health, comfort, and joy. From a clinical perspective, choosing the right product matters greatly. Medical-grade silicone devices designed specifically for women minimize irritation and adapt gently to the needs of aging tissues. Pairing them with a high-quality water-based lubricant helps reduce friction, protects delicate vaginal walls, and makes the experience safer and more pleasant. Equally important is hygiene washing before and after use. Drying carefully and storing in a clean environment ensures long-term safety. These small steps are not just routine, they safeguard health and reduce the chance of chronic irritation or infection that can sometimes follow improper use. Beyond safety, there is an emotional liberation that comes with acceptance. One of my patients, a woman in her late 60s, confessed that after buying her first vibrator, she expected embarrassment, but instead found herself laughing alone in her bedroom. She told me she hadn't felt playful in years and that the experience reminded her of her own vitality. Such stories highlight that these tools are not replacements for relationships, nor admissions of defeat, but affirmations of self-worth and courage to embrace change at any stage of life. Of course, discernment remains essential. Poorly made or unregulated products can pose risks, which is why women should approach this choice with the same care they would bring to any health decision. Starting gently, allowing time, and respecting the body's feedback ensures the process feels empowering rather than overwhelming. Even a simple decision to explore can be symbolic. It represents a woman's refusal to let age dictate her right to pleasure, healing, and discovery. In truth, the safe use of sexual aids symbolizes something larger: permission to invest in your own well-being without apology. And once this permission is embraced, another tender question begins to surface. Must intimacy always be solitary, or can companionship find its place alongside independence in later life? 6. Companionship versus independence. After exploring the value of tools and self-care, another question arises quietly in many consultations. Do I really need someone else, or am I complete on my own? This is not a trivial dilemma, but one of the most profound choices women face in later life. Companionship offers comfort, shared laughter, and the reassurance of touch, while independence grants freedom, peace, and the ability to shape each day without compromise. Research on aging and mental health consistently shows that social connection is one of the strongest predictors of longevity and quality of life. Even simple companionship, such as walking with a neighbor or attending a community group, can lower stress hormones and improve mood. Touch itself carries measurable benefits, lowering blood pressure and supporting immune function. Yet the desire for independence is equally valid. For some women, solitude provides space to rediscover personal passions, travel freely, or focus on grandchildren without the obligations of another relationship. I recall a patient in her 70s who found new joy in a weekly book club where conversations turned into friendships and eventually a gentle companionship with another widower. They never pursued marriage, but she described the relief of holding someone's hand again. On the other side, another woman in her mid-60s told me that after trying to date, she realized the stress outweighed the joy. She chose her independence wholeheartedly and found fulfillment in self-pleasure and emotional intimacy with close friends. Both stories are equally valid, reminding us that fulfillment after 50 has no single formula. The key lies in asking honestly, what nourishes me most right now? For some, it is the warmth of a body beside them. For others, it is the deep satisfaction of self-reliance. There's no shame in either path, because both honor the human need for connection while respecting the individual's season of life. For many, the balance shifts over time, proving that companionship and independence are not enemies, but flexible choices that can coexist. And as women make peace with this balance, a final truth awaits that aging itself does not extinguish sexuality, but reshapes it, offering an unexpected chance to rediscover pleasure in new forms. 7. Embracing aging and sexuality. One of the most liberating truths I share with my patients is this: aging does not mark the end of sexuality, but rather the beginning of a new relationship with it. Many women expect that with menopause, desire should vanish and pleasure will no longer be possible. Yet evidence tells a different story. Large population studies reveal that nearly 30% of women between 65 and 74 remain sexually active, and even among those 75 to 85, almost 1 in 5 continue to enjoy intimacy. These numbers prove that sexuality does not have an expiration date. Of course, the body does change. Estrogen levels decline, natural lubrication decreases, and tissues may become more delicate. But these changes are not barriers. They are invitations to approach intimacy differently. Gentle exercises to strengthen the pelvic floor relaxation practices, such as mindful breathing and the willingness to allow more time for arousal, can transform what once felt like limitation into an opportunity for renewal. When women adapt with patience and kindness toward themselves, they discover new textures of pleasure, often deeper and more meaningful than before. I remember a woman in her early 70s who told me with quiet tears that she had, for the first time in her life, learned how to enjoy her own body. She explained that in her younger years she had been consumed by the roles of wife, mother, and caregiver, never pausing to ask what truly brought her joy. Only when she lived alone did she realize she could explore slowly, without fear or judgment. And she described the experience as awakening a part of her she never knew existed. Her story is not rare. It reflects a pattern I see again and again in later life. To embrace aging and sexuality is to refuse the myth that pleasure belongs only to youth. It is a decision to see the body not as broken, but as wise, capable of guiding us into new forms of closeness. And once women accept this perspective, the next step becomes practical. How can these truths be applied in daily life through small, gentle actions that make intimacy sustainable and real? Knowing the science is important, but transformation only begins when knowledge turns into practice. Many women share with me that they hesitate to take the first step because they fear the process will feel overwhelming, or that their bodies will no longer respond the way they once did. That is why I encourage beginning with something simple and gentle, creating small rituals that invite comfort rather than pressure. The first and perhaps most essential step is relaxation. Before any intimate exploration, give yourself permission to slow down. Light a candle, play soft music, or take a warm shower. These small gestures reduce stress hormones and allow blood flow to improve naturally. Your body, like any living system, responds more openly when it feels safe and cared for. From there, begin to reintroduce mindful touch. Choose a quiet evening and dedicate a few minutes to reconnecting with your body. Start with areas such as your arms, shoulders, or abdomen before moving gradually toward more sensitive regions. The goal is not to rush toward climax, but to rediscover how your body feels in this stage of life. Over time, you will notice which sensations bring comfort and which awaken deeper pleasure, and that awareness itself becomes healing. For many women, vaginal dryness is one of the most common barriers, yet it can be addressed with something as simple as a high-quality water-based or silicone-based lubricant. This small addition not only brings greater comfort, but also protects delicate tissues from irritation, allowing intimacy to feel safe again. Some women may eventually choose to introduce gentle aids designed with medical-grade materials, using them slowly and carefully, always with lubrication and proper hygiene. These tools are not replacements for human closeness, but rather companions that preserve circulation, elasticity, and a sense of playful vitality. Finally, it is important to remember that intimacy does not exist only in the bedroom. A nightly ritual of reading and soft lighting, wrapping yourself in a favorite blanket, or practicing deep breathing while massaging your hands can awaken the same hormonal pathways that soothe and restore the mind. These practices remind you that you are still worthy of tenderness, even when it comes from your own care. What matters is not how often you do these things or whether they lead to orgasm, but that you consistently respond to your body with kindness. With each small step, you reclaim intimacy, not as a luxury reserved for youth, but as an essential act of self-care at every age. As we close this conversation, I want you to remember one essential truth. Sexuality does not disappear with age. Desire may shift in rhythm and intensity, but it remains a vital part of health, confidence, and emotional well-being. We have seen how acknowledging desire, exploring self-pleasure, using safe aids, and balancing companionship with independence can become pathways to renewal rather than decline. Each step reminds us that intimacy is not about proving worth to others. It is about honoring your own body and spirit. My advice is to approach this chapter with patience and gentleness. Accept the changes in your body not as losses, but as invitations to explore new textures of closeness. Begin with small rituals that calm and nurture you, and allow yourself to be curious. Celebrate the freedom of rediscovery, because pleasure is not bound to youth or circumstance. It is bound to your willingness to listen to yourself with compassion. If you carry one message from today, let it be this: you are not too late. Every woman, regardless of age or relationship status, has the right to desire, to intimacy, and to joy. Reclaiming this part of yourself is not selfish. It is an act of self-care and dignity. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this message resonated, please subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments and join this community where women's voices are heard and valued. Together, we remind the world that aging is not the end of intimacy. It is the beginning of a new chapter.